And let's go now to Timothy Hafey, former federal prosecutor, former lead investigator to the January 6th committee, and author of the brand new book titled Harbinger: What January 6th and Charlottesville Reveal About Rising Threats to American Democracy. I'll mention the book in just a moment further, Tim, but it is excellent. But let me get to the significance of sentencing Donald Trump 10 days before inauguration. How could this be about preserving democracy and the rule of law if he effectively turned out to be above the law, except for this new title of convicted felon?
Yeah, Alex, it doesn't have a lot of practical consequences given the unconditional discharge that the judge imposed. It does come with either a feature or a bug, right? A badge of honor or dishonor, depending on your perspective. I think for a lot of Americans, it reaffirms their skepticism about the ethics of the president-elect. For others, it reinforces that he has been unfairly maligned and targeted. So I think it only sort of reinforces the polarization. But in terms of practical consequences, my understanding is that in Florida, felons are precluded from voting until they complete their sentence, and that includes any period of supervision. And since there was no active sentence or period of supervision imposed in this case, that does not prevent the former president from voting. He can't own a firearm, and there are some collateral consequences of a felony conviction, but nothing that will debilitate him from performing the duties of president.
Okay. Judge Juan Merchan, he repeatedly pointed out the unusual and unprecedented nature of this case. Here's some of what he said about it yesterday. Take a listen.
Never before has this court been presented with such a unique and remarkable set of circumstances. Donald Trump, the ordinary citizen, Donald Trump, the criminal defendant, would not be entitled to such considerable protections. I'm referring to protections that extend well beyond those afforded the average defendant who winds their way through the criminal justice system each day. No, ordinary citizens do not receive those legal protections.
Tim, did the judge have no choice but to let him off without a slap on the wrist, really? I mean, he said 32 cases were tried there at the same time. How would those other defendants feel about the appearance of justice here? And not to mention Michael Cohen, who served prison time.
Yeah, I think the judge is 100% correct, Alex, when he says that there's really no precedent here that is really close to the facts presented in this case. If the president-elect had not been successful in seeking re-election, he would not have gotten an unconditional discharge. He might have gotten some period of incarceration. Other defendants who have committed these falsification of business records offenses have had much more onerous sentencing provisions. But he, as the incoming president of the United States, is, according to the Supreme Court, there has to be deference to his ability to carry out the executive function, the very important responsibilities that he has. That's why we're in this unprecedented territory where he's treated like an ordinary citizen with respect to culpability, but not in terms of sentence, because it would interfere with his role as president of the United States.
So the next big legal fight is likely a push to block DOJ from releasing Special Counsel Jack Smith's report on the criminal investigations into Trump's D.C. election interference, as well as the classified documents cases. So the 11th Circuit has already overturned Judge Aileen Cannon's block of the reports. Does this now go all the way to the Supreme Court? I mean, maybe with the hope of running out the clock until January 20th, because Trump can then order his next attorney general, likely to be Pam Bondi, to not release it, right?
Yes. I mean, I believe that the president-elect's lawyers could try to quickly appeal the 11th Circuit ruling up to the Supreme Court. The Judge Cannon's ruling requires that the Attorney General not release the report for 3 days following the 11th Circuit ruling. So I think it's unlikely that any legal process will stop Merrick Garland from releasing the report. Arguably, Judge Cannon really has no jurisdiction over the report about the election interference matter, even if she arguably did at one point have jurisdiction over the information about the classified documents. The case, of course, has been dismissed. So the Attorney General could decide, I question the judge's jurisdiction in the first place, and go ahead and release it. So I think that's likely, Alex. I think regardless of further legal proceedings, the AG will release the volume of the report, the Jack Smith report on the election interference case prior to January 20th.
Okay. There's another new headline this week, that being Ashley Babbitt's mother says Trump called her as he continues to promise pardons to January 6th rioters. But Tim, you make this point in your new book. You write, quote, "A disengaged citizenry is a more insidious threat to democracy and ultimately more destructive than a large crowd of angry rioters." Can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. So the book is about the commonalities between the Charlottesville events in 2017 and the January 6th attack on the Capitol, both of which I was involved in investigating. Both of them, to me, were actually large forums for anger and grievance about institutions, about government, about media, about higher education, even about science. We have an undercurrent in this country of extreme cynicism about the efficacy of those institutions. The reaction to that cynicism is either anger, like we saw in Charlottesville or at the Capitol, or apathy. And I think it's easier to compartmentalize and manage the anger. It's a lot harder to fight against the apathy. My fear is that a lot of people in this country, because of their cynicism about institutions, just disengage, and they don't vote, and they don't talk about things with their friends and neighbors. They don't educate themselves. And that, to me, is a bigger threat to democracy long term.
Let me tell you, Tim, I got to thank you. This book, it has gotten me through a lot, particularly even this week, because this week my focus has so been on California, which you know I love and I'm from. But I've been able to read this and learn so much. I'm so impressed with everything about Charlottesville as well. I didn't know before that you were that involved. It's fabulous. Thank you.